What's your homeowners association horror story? Fined multiple times and threatened with a lien by the hoa because we would not water our grass during a major drought season. It was cheaper and easier to fight the hoa since the city and state passed regulations banning constant watering and green grass. The city had Google-like vans with cameras that'd be driving neighborhoods to catch violators and find them. Super illegal. Hoa can't make any regulations requiring homeowners to break city, state, federal laws or regulations. My good friend had a story. Her and the husband moved into this gated community. She loves having a bird bath in her backyard, and she gardens a lot, so the decoration makes sense. Turns out our hoa figured out that she had said bird bath in her backyard. Apparently a bird bath is a lawn ornament, which was forbidden. She told them she would remove it. A week later she gets another message saying that it hasn't been removed. It wasn't. Obviously her and the husband put it together that the hoa is snooping in her backyard. For a week, she spends her time outside sunbathing in the nude setting her trap. Sure enough, a hoa narc opens the gates to their backyard and sees her in the nude. Instant call to the police for privacy violations. The hoa gave up and let her have a bird bath. She is now on the board of the hoa and they leave her alone. I had just moved into my house a few months prior when I got a letter threatening to be fined $200 stating that my mailbox wasn't black. I thought surely they had the wrong house because my mailbox was in fact black. So I contacted them and they gave a runaround arguing that it wasn't. I told them to come look and of course they said it was on me to prove to them it was black. So I snapped a photo and emailed it to them. I hear nothing back for well over a month. Then get another letter giving me a courtesy week extension before I'm fined. I'm livid at this point, so contact the hoa again asking for an explanation as to what exactly the problem is. I'm finally told that neighbors felt my mailbox was rather worn and needed to be painted or replaced. So basically it wasn't black enough for them. So I freaking painted it. Now for the part that set me over the edge. After a few months or so I learned that the freaking hoa will replace a mailbox, as it's covered under our terms. So I called them asking about why they threatened to fine me when they were the ones that should replace it if not to standard. They stated it was because they had no open work orders for my mailbox and that it was my responsibility to notify them if it needed maintenance, not theirs. If you fancy being really petty, every week send a request saying that your mailbox is in need or repair. Our hoa ordered us to clean our recently power washed black shingle roof because all the shingles were so dirty they turned black. My parents live in a neighborhood with several of the local physicians. One has like 6 kids, and the youngest has profound autism and is nonverbal. Well, he's about 5 or 6, and he loves riding his little tricycle in their driveway, which is pretty large. He would do it for hours. His mom stayed home with him for the most part, and she and her husband became concerned that in a moment, he'd drive into the road if they happened to look away. So, they got some orange construction netting that they would just put across the end of the driveway while he was out there, and would take it down when they went back inside. I always thought that it was a good idea to keep him safe. Anyway, several of the families in the neighborhood were not pleased with this, and said it was an eyesore, so a meeting was called. It turned into attacks on how they were taking care of their son, and how it made the neighborhood look ignorant to have that netting up. Needless to say, no one offered any other options, and this family was so irate that they packed up and moved within a month. This was about 3-4 years ago, and that house still hasn't sold. They live out in the country somewhere, and last time I talked to the dad, the son is doing very well in his new home, and he still rides his bike for hours on end. Freaking heartless. When we first moved in I asked the neighbor across the street how serious the hoa was here. He said bad, and then told me a story where he got a notice with a photo of his recycle bin being left on the street for too long. The photo was of him walking the recycling bin back to his garage. LOL. I had the hoa come out to approve a fence I was going to install. The lady at the hoa office was very nice and said my plans were within the covenant bylaws etc. We just need to have the inspector check it out himself to sign off. When he gets to my house he says he doesn't understand what I wanted to do. I explained the type of fence I wanted to install and he said that wasn't, from his knowledge, allowed. I walk him out to the street and point 2 houses down and say that house, right there has the fence I want to install. He scoffs at this, Walks down to look and sure enough it was exactly as I described it. He tells me, well, we don't like to have a bunch of different types of fences in the neighborhood. I reply, I don't care what you prefer. The covenant says I can have that fence and that's what I'm going to install because it's within the specifications of the covenant. Old fella didn't have much to say after that. I got a letter the next week with approved for fence install. My ex-BFF's father was part of the homeowners board for their townhouse community. His wife would walk their dog around the entire neighborhood every day and carry a notebook to write infractions to report back to her husband. Ridiculous stuff. Neighbors have a window AC unit, reported and fined. Have a garden that's a square foot too big, reported and fined. Some people have absolutely no lives. My horror stories all revolve around dealing with them as a dispatcher. The fact that a hoe doesn't want cars parked on their street has nothing to do with whether or not it's legal to do so, and there really is no argument. The police can't legally tow a car that isn't parked in violation of any law, regardless of what you like or don't like, but they will argue and want to talk to the chief of police. Not my story, but my dad's. He moved into a new townhouse in summer of 2013. It was a foreclosure property, as the previous tenants were kicked out for not paying their mortgage and for not paying their HOA dues. They gave everyone in the HOA new patios and decks the summer prior. It was required, and you had to get a new deck patio. The tenants had to pay for them in monthly installments in the next 3 years along with their HOA dues. As I said, the previous tenants foreclosed on their home. However, there was one rule placed when they got the decks, which was that you couldn't move out without paying off your deck first. He was told by HOA that he would not have to pay off the deck because it was foreclosed and he was not responsible at all for paying it off. Sweet. Free deck. He signed off on that. He moved in. But then he started getting assessments from the HOA for the deck. But, wait, he wasn't supposed to be paying for the deck. He fought it with the board. Even with the signed thing saying we didn't have to pay for the deck, the board went against him. He ended up having to pay off the remaining balance on the deck. To this day, he refuses to speak about this topic. It's a trigger for him. Bring me to court B. I have this signed document saying I'm not responsible for that cost. My father-in-law's condo corp has a shared pool. The old folks don't like to share, so they have all kinds of silly rules, like no more than one guest per resident, residents only times alternating every hour, etc. My father-in-law can't even take his own 2 grandkids for a swim because he'd exceed the number of allowed guests. So many rules the dang pool is usually empty. Because the residents were still breaking the rules, they passed a new rule that if any resident was caught breaking the pool rules, they would close the pool to everyone for a week and post the offender's name and reason for the closure on the community bulletin board. Freaking children. I would just constantly break a rule every week. Only plant oak trees even after multiple arborists and botanists informed the board that doing so would give all of them various diseases and all would need to be cut down. 10 years later, all have been cut down because they have diseases and mites. I'm an arborist and seeing oak trees planted between the sidewalk and road for 5 feet of space drives me nuts. The Hoa neighborhood I grew up in had 2 oaks in front of every house. 20 years later the roads and sidewalks are cracked or bulging. Not a horror story yet, but it could be. When we moved in, someone stopped by to say hi, but more like to tell us our boat can't be parked on our lot. My wife told her, well, we read all of the rules and it doesn't say that. She replied, well, I wrote the rules so I should know. My wife told her to go read them. Don't hear anything for months. When we get our annual dues packet, there is a newsletter saying our lot is in violation and that we stated plans to modify our garage to fit the boat in the spring. We never said that. They suggested setting a deadline for us and setting a vote to add boats to the list they already had. Campers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, and travel trailers. Bought the house intending to build a detached garage, but in order to comply with the design rules it would cost me $90 KUSD, so I'm waiting until I get an official anything in the mail, then I'll get a storage unit. BTW, my neighbor has been here 6 months longer than us and they have a boat in their driveway too. Tell them to provide proof of the garage remodel you promised. Sounds like some fuckery. They sent us a series of nasty notices to remove the dead tree in our front yard. The tree had lost all of its leaves and it was unsightly, apparently. The catch is that they sent us this notice in November. You know, like Fall, when perfectly healthy trees lose their leaves. We pretended we didn't understand which tree they were talking about until spring, when the tree magically came back to life. We're also going to fine you for leaving all that strange white stuff in your yard in the winter. When my sister was hit by a drunk driver, the insurance took a few days to decide what to do with her car since it was a weekend. Neighbor called the police and said it was abandoned and had been there for months. Luckily, the police took our side. They pulled up an accident report showing that car across town 2 days ago, then told her to frick off. When I was a kid, I lived in one of the 2 front rooms of the house, which were the hottest in the summer and the coldest in the winter. My dad didn't like to use the AC, so we all just had fans. One summer it got so unbearably hot in my room that fans just weren't cutting it and I was miserable. My dad then put an AC unit in my window and it was awesome. But it was short-lived because the hoa told us to take it down because it was an eyesore. My parents told them it was for their child but they didn't care. So my parents had to take it down. The kicker is that, just down the street, a guy who had the exact same model house as us had an AC unit installed in the same exact window as the one we had it in, and the hoa never said a word to him. This is one of the most infuriating Reddit threads I've ever read. That's scummy as frick. My mother died in September of 2016. My disabled father went into the hospital and then long-term rehab until the present. The house was in my mom's name and their neighbor across the street is the treasurer of the hoa. He knew my mom died of cancer within a year of her diagnosis and that my dad was in the hospital. He billed my dead mother for a year and when the bills were unpaid, he took it to court to begin foreclosure proceedings. At this point, I received a certified letter and contacted a lawyer to help. It was originally $1,700, but increased to $4,200 with late fees and attorney fees. Our lawyer is confident we can settle for far less than $4,200. That scumbag donks out. Didn't happen to me personally, but I guess I can tell you about my parents' experience with their hoa. Dad retired and decided that he really wanted to buy a camper and travel. Mum was all about it, both of them very excited. So dad runs off and trades his F-150 truck for a F-250 with the biggest diesel V8, buys a gooseneck camper, and waits for spring. Camper in the backyard, truck in the garage, no big deal. Not long after he gets a visit from a lady. She's got a list of rules from the hoa that was established long after my parents had built their house, something like 15 years later when the subdivision really took off, saying that dad couldn't have the camper on his property because it was an eyesore. Mind you, this camper is in the backyard, behind a 6 feet privacy fence. You could still see it, sure, but it's not like it was old and in disrepair either. So here's my retired parents, living in a subdivision that has an hoa that was established long after they built their home, and the hoa is expecting them to abide by rules they didn't agree to. He never moved the camper. Was watching a friend's house cat while she was away, left my car at her house, in her deeded spot, with a visitor tag on it, to drop her off at the airport, then went home to my house, slept, went to work, returned after work the next day to feed cat, check mail, and get my own car back. No car. Call her on vacation. She finds property management phone. I call. They tell me it was towed as it had a flat tire. $290 later. Photo, overnight storage, and a flat fix. I had my car back. Frick those buttholes. The car wasn't even there 24 hours, and it wasn't flat when I parked it. You've been visited by the masonry dog. You'll never deal with an earthquake or sinkhole if you comment lay the foundation papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.